want the label that's correct, or do you want the label like lazy, troublemaker,
Yes.
you know, naughty? Which label do you want, the right one or the wrong one? Because those wrong ones can affect a kid like their whole life.
Yes.
So
100%.
yeah. So it's
I
kind of
will
like,
I'll never forget this. This, and I share this because it's my son doesn't like me sharing about his story, but this is my story, I suppose. Is, you know, going in and with the diagnosis of my son, when he was first diagnosed with ADHD, and I had a meeting with the principal, and the principal told me, no, he's just naughty. And I said, I showed him the letter from the pediatrician, and it said, you know, a clear diagnosis of ADHD. I said, are you saying, I said, you're looking at a professional, a clinical professional who has diagnosed him with ADHD. Are you saying that you know better than this professional, and are you still saying that he's naughty? Yes, I just believe he's naughty. And so I, at that point, got up and walked out of that meeting. Yeah, it's just horrible though, that because you're right, 100% correct. Those are the types of labels that they get, that you're given. And you, so kind of going right back to the beginning for you, what was, and I am aware that there's ADHD here as well as autism, and so and you probably can't really separate them out because they're probably quite intertwined in terms of your experience, but that's okay. And I'm just kind of wondering, you know, what was your experience in you mentioned how you were sort of accepted, and in your family experience, what was school like?
When I was young, primary school was just like really fun. As I said, I was quite popular because I came up with cool ideas and that sort of stuff. And then we actually moved to a different school area. So I went to a different school, and in that school I just so it was late primary. It was just like, I don't know, like it was just because I was so different, I was just so badly bullied. It was like, and the school like would try and do stuff like my nicest teacher that I ever had, or no, the second nicest teacher I ever had, she was like, oh, I know what we should do. Let's put Elanor in the middle of a circle of the whole class and have all of them say something nice about Elanor.
Oh my god!
Like, that's not gonna help. It's just like, oh my god, please.
Let's single Elanor out and do something different with Elanor than we do with any other child.
Yeah, it was, and also like, so I have this, like, because I said before about the how I can't, like, spelling and mental numbers are very difficult to me, but like reading comprehension, writing, like if I have a spell checker, some people say I write quite well. I've done, like, I've got a master's degree in paleontology.
Amazing.
But I can't tell if the cashier has given me the right change, you know, because I can't do it in my head. So it's kind of like I was this weird situation where I was, I don't want to say gifted, but very good in some areas of school and very bad in other areas of school. And
I hear you.
In terms of academically, and the main thing once I got to like high school and we started having stuff like homework and stuff, the main thing was I just couldn't do my homework until the last minute. And I think this was more about ADHD than autism.
ADHD, it sounds like ADHD.
It was just like, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't do my homework until I had the adrenaline of shit, it's due tomorrow. Then I'd stay up all night doing, and that carried on to me through university, which is an incredibly stressful way to live. It's not, yeah, that
Yeah.
so when people say, like, do you wish that you knew that you're autistic back at school? In today's world, yes, but back then people's understanding of autism was so much worse than it. I mean, it's not that amazing now,
Yeah.
but so much better than it used to be, that
Yeah.
I feel like that wouldn't have helped at school, but having an ADHD diagnosis would have helped so much. I feel like almost angry at how much I missed out
Yeah.
in my school years not having medication. And so it just like, especially because a lot of ADHD medication is extremely rapid working and extremely rapid out of your system. Like if you have Ritalin, you feel it working within 10 minutes and it goes away after like 3 hours. So I don't understand parents. Sorry, I'm going to rant now. I don't understand parents who are like,
rant away,
oh, we don't want to medicate him and turn him into or we don't want to medicate her and turn him into a zombie. And I'm like, okay, but just try. Like, you know, just try.
Just give it a try.
It's going to be out of the system in like 3 hours, you know.
Yeah.
And then yeah.
I think what's really hard about children with ADHD, not that I've got ADHD, but they can't articulate what, you know, because they don't have the words, do they? They can't articulate what it's like for them, and that's what I've noticed, is that as an adult you can now reflect back and say, this is what it was like for me, but at the time you don't have the language to be able to do that, and so it's hard to explain, I'm actually suffering here, because you can't you don't have that kind of insight or ability to articulate it, but that's actually what's happening. You're actually, because a part of your brain is not working the way that it's meant to, and therefore you're struggling in a lot of different areas, both socially and in your education, and it affects
I was
everything.
like, I was trying my hardest, like, and I just couldn't do it at all until I had that adrenaline, because the adrenaline works similar to dopamine and stuff in Ritalin, in that it lets you focus. And then when I had it, like, I would try so hard every single time, like, this time it's going to be different, this time I won't leave it to the last minute, and it was always at the last minute, and people thought I was so, you know, lazy, or like, it's just, it was so, oh my god, I can't even begin to imagine how better my life would have been if I was medicated back then. So with what's quite interesting as well is, so my son had a diagnosis quite early. I think it was 2. I remember you said something before about the label helps them be taught in the way that helps them, you know, once you have, you know. So with my son, he was actually super delayed. He didn't even babble until he was 2. I remember being so excited that he was babbling, and he got when he was like early 2-year-old, he got a global developmental delay diagnosis, and that was quite stressful, because they were like, you know, normally global development delays, once they're like 5 or 6 or something, it turns into you know, an intellectual impairment, and that. But then when he was late 2-year-old, he got diagnosed with autism, and so all the stuff that we'd been trying to help him, like, he couldn't hold a pen, he couldn't hold a spoon, to the point that the OT was like, just tape it to his hand, which we didn't do, because we were like, that's ridiculous, it's not going to work. But once we knew he was autistic, we like could find out it was actually a sensory aversion to touching. You know, so he'd always like hold a pen on a spoon at the very tip, and he couldn't. And then, so we did a lot of therapy with like getting him used to his hand touching stuff. And like that helps so much. And then suddenly, just by giving him, like, understanding why he was struggling, allowed us to teach him in the right way. He like it was so crazy. It was like every single day there was like a new skill he was learning. And then when he was 3,
can I just pause you there, because what I'm aware of is, and I just wanted to point this out as well, is that misdiagnosis can be just as terrible, right? Because imagine if you had taped that to his hand, and you know, and he was feeling huge anxiety. I just want to acknowledge, you know, that misdiagnosis is really, really
Yeah.
tough, because of course, as soon as you have a diagnosis, you want to help them, and sometimes you're actually it's exactly the opposite to what they actually are needing. So it's really tricky. So yeah, no, carry on though. Yeah.
When you're a parent, like, you think you should trust the professionals, right? And
Yeah.
I've just heard so many stories from other people, the harm that well-meaning professionals do. Oh,
yeah.
I've got so many stories of, even in our own experience, like, you need to have someone who knows about autism, even in stuff like the GP, if you're going there for a sore stomach.
Yeah.
Like, we might not be able to describe the pain in the right way. Like, I remember during COVID, my daughter like had this suddenly like stopped drinking and eating, and she was just like had a massive fever, and I kept saying, "What's wrong? Does your throat hurt?" And she's like, "No." So we ended up going to the I had to take her out during COVID to take her to the you know, the accident emergency after hours doctor. And eventually they saw her and they're like, "Oh, she's got tonsillitis." And I was like, "Why didn't you tell me that you, like, if you why didn't you tell me that when I said your throat hurt? Why did you say?" Obviously I wasn't being mean about it, just curious, like, why didn't you say my throat hurt? And she said, "I knew something hurt, but I didn't know what it was." So some autistic people have a trouble with interoception, where you can't actually tell what your body's telling her. So she knew that something was sore, but she couldn't recognize that it was in her throat because she couldn't.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like, it makes even me, so I'm autistic myself, like, I know that I still have to learn all the time how it affects my children and how to support them. Just because I experience it in one way doesn't mean they experience it the same way.
Yeah.
Like, even with that baby, like, so my son, he didn't know how to sleep. And so we actually, in Australia, they have this thing called sleep school, that they pay for you to go somewhere and they try and teach your baby how to sleep. But I imagine every single mother has had this experience where your baby's not doing something and someone's like, "Oh, well, just do X, that will fix it." And it's like, it's just because it worked for your baby doesn't mean it works for, you know, my baby. And it's just kind of like, imagine that, but for everything, where every single time you say something, "Oh, well, just do this, just smack them, just, you know, say they have to do it, just do this." And it's like, it's all well-meaning, but it makes life harder, because you're like, well, who do I listen to? Who do I, you know, whose advice do I follow? Like, what do I say to someone who's telling me that I'm kind of friendly with them, and now it's telling me that, oh, I should just do this? How do I say, actually, that's a really fucking stupid idea? You know? You didn't know. It just makes it harder to ever talk about problems, because, you know, you're just like, I just want to talk about the problem, and I want you to believe me that this is a problem, and not just dismiss it or say, "Oh, it's just because you're not doing this," you know?
And it's also kind of like, it's especially hard when they're young, because they're less able to tell you what they need or what's going on. And so you're having to try and work that out super hard, because you've got it's not even, you know, it's far beyond, you know, how parents talk about, oh, you know, children don't come with a manual. Well, autistic children also don't come with a manual, and also, like we said, you meet one autistic person, you meet one, you know, that there's not, every single autistic person is very, very individual, and so you have to learn the nuances of your child when they're unable to communicate it to you, and it's super, super challenging.
For with my son, so as I said, we were very blessed that he was diagnosed very early, so we could like, you know, get him the right support, and then know what supports are the right supports, you know. And luckily I was in quite a good community of there's things called like autistic led communities, where you can, before I knew I was autistic, join and hear other people's perspectives and stuff like that. And it was really helpful my son. But even though I had an ADHD diagnosis, I didn't realize that he also had ADHD until like late last year. And it's because, and I think this is when he told me this, I was like, actually, that's really similar to my experience at school, is that he could never focus on what the teacher was saying, but he was smart enough to be able to understand the context clues, like to know what to do. Like they'd go out to sport and the teacher would explain the sport and he would just kind of like hang back and watch and be like, okay, what actually is happening here? Because he couldn't. And it's just kind of like, well, how many other kids fall through the cracks because the massive chunk of school life they're not engaging with because they have these workarounds. Like, so when I was at school, in high school, and I couldn't do any mental math.
It's a coping strategy, isn't it?
Yeah. I got really good at counting on my fingers.
But it's not kind of.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not that they're not actually excelling.
Yeah.
And
so
not actually they're not getting to be their best selves, but they're just coping.
Yeah, because it's like so much of the energy in figuring out what the hell's going on, that now that he's medicated at school, he's like so there's like this my school's reports have like the graphs of the last few years at school, and he was always had like exceeding expectations, at expectations, and it's below expectations, but they called it like heading towards expectations, like positive, and he was always below. He was always behind, and then he got medicated, and now he's like actually shooting up, like reaching the expectations. And it's just and we like, because there's also like the idea that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because my son is a very kind person and a very calm person, and doesn't cause trouble. And because his ADHD type is not it's the inattentive type, not the hyperactive type.
Right.
Whenever we try to raise concerns, that'd be like, well, no, he's fine,
But I'd really like to talk to you, just to come back to your mental health as an adult, because it sounds like when you look back, was your mental health okay, as a child, and was it later as an adult that it kind of went downhill, or was there always anxiety there, always kind of some depression there, or?
So I didn't, there was so much stress at high school, and that was like the ADHD related procrastination. But I was once I had my group of friends who didn't, I was actually quite happy at school, because I love school. I love, I don't know, I like learning about things. It's fun. But when I went to uni, I got so depressed, and I was like, because I guess they expected, like there was no support in that. They expected when you're at uni, you're kind of like an adult, even though you're basically an old teen. But they like, I couldn't get, it was just, I don't know, I was just like such a bad time. And then I actually started my honors project, and I had to pull out because my mental health was so bad. And I was like, so at the time, my brain was just like, it just felt like so, my brain felt so awful, like, and then I started like hurting myself, not because I wanted to die or whatever. It's just that when I physically was hurt, then it made my brain quiet for a second, because I was concentrating on the pain of the physical pain instead of the mental pain. And so I was like, well, this is messed up. Why am I, I shouldn't be cutting myself. I shouldn't be doing this. And we had like free counselling through the uni. So I'd go to the counsellors, I'd try and get help.
Mhm.
And the thing is, when I was at the counsellors, I felt positive because I felt like, oh my God, yes, I'm finally going to get help. And I would quite matter-of-factly talk about, you know, what happened. And I wasn't emotional when I was talking about it, because I was just like, I was so happy to be getting help, and I was so happy, and I was just like, this is what happened, blah, 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 blah. And then they would always be like, well, you're not depressed enough. You're not depressed. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, you know, I'm cutting myself. I'm suicide idealizing. I'm like thinking about suicide a lot. Like, and they're just like, well, you know, depressed people don't come here and like talk to me so finely. And it was
Wow.
great. Yeah. And then
So you had some pretty terrible counselling quality.
yeah. And then at one point, and every time there was someone, I kept trying though, which also messed me up, because I'm just like, you know, if you've seen 2 different ones and both of them think you're not depressed and both of you think you're fine, maybe that's just unlucky. But if you see 6 of them or 10 of them and all of them are the same, it's kind of like, then that's when the problem must have been me. I must be the problem. So so
that's extreme. That's actually very traumatic. Like, that's when you're reaching out for help, you've got hope, because you think, oh, things can get better because I've got this help. But if you've reached out for help multiple times and you find that it's not helping, you know, in fact, if anything, you're feeling worse. Gosh, that would have been really, really hard. It just goes to show the responsibility that therapists have, and how they have the power to make things better, but they've got also the power to make things so much worse. So it's such a responsibility.
Yeah, and I also appreciate that this probably were then and probably now severely underfunded, and I know that they must have triage things to know we only have to we can only treat the, you know, the most badness, the most struggling people, but they need to reassess what they consider struggling, because I wasn't presenting in the way that they were trained or the way that they knew a depressed person looks.
Right.
I was just like, oh, no, you're fine, you know.
Are you talking about the mental health system here rather than a counsellor? Yeah.
Well, I don't really know the difference between
a
counsellor and, you know, I just
but so a counsellor being a private counsellor that does that, or not necessarily private, that might be working for an organisation, but that's not it's not for the hospital.
Oh yeah, well, I was seeing people through the uni health system, and then I was like seeing like once someone, they sent me to like hospital they believed me for a change, sent me to hospital. The hospital's like, it's weird, go home. I'm like, I don't have a car, how am I going to get home? And then they're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll give you a taxi to get home. And I was like, okay. Like, it's just kind of I remember I tried to get help through the public system after I dropped out of my honours degree. I moved home. I tried to get help there, and it was just went through the hospital there, and that was just, no, you're not depressed enough. And like, I was kind of like, what does depressed stuff look like, you know? I want to,
how bad
I know I need to die. Why is that? What is it? Like, what? Sorry.
No, exactly what you're saying. How bad do you have to be in order to be listened to, or in order to get the help that you're asking for? And when
they did try to help, it was always things that aren't helpful, like the things that would help a neurotypical person, but they're not going to help me, or, you know. And so even when they're like, well, we did give you this help and it didn't work, and I'm like, I know, like, it didn't, you know, I don't know why it didn't work, you're the professional, you know. And looking back, it's just like, oh my gosh, like that would never have worked. Now I know more about autism and know more about myself. I'm just like, no wonder that didn't work. Like, Yeah.
So at the time, actually accessing the mental health system, you kind of felt like, well, that they eventually gave me help, but it didn't work, so it must be me. As
Yeah,
kind of
basically.
the
And also
conclusion that
that,
you reached. Yeah.
yeah, I'm broken, like there's not, and so going back to the idea of like we were talking about before about the labels,
Mm.
like there's a saying, I don't know exactly, but from memory or something like finding out you're autistic is like finding out for a zebra to find out that they're actually a zebra, not a failed horse. Like
Yeah.
I am not a failed neurotypical person. I'm an autistic person who has
Yes.
been failed through the system, not supporting me,
Mm.
but it's not inherently my fault. And that was just so,
Yeah.
and to find out that other people, like I wasn't like alone in some freak of nature. It was just like
Yeah.
so amazing to
Yeah.
understand why I thought like I did, why things happened to me, why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So diagnosis made a huge difference, and understanding yourself made a huge difference.
Yeah, it was just
When you think back to here's a question for you in terms of mental health. In your case, and I'm recognizing that every single autistic person will need something different, because every single autistic person is individual and has individual needs, and there's not this kind of blanket, this will help. It's got to be very individualized. But in your case, in your story, when you look back on the type of tools that or the things that they thought would help you, can you now see why it didn't help, and can you now recognize what does help for you?
So the biggest thing that helps me, I mean, medically wise, is being medicated for ADHD, because that's like, oh my God, it's amazing. I can actually, like, it sounds ridiculous, but I can like see a sock on the floor and go and pick it up. Otherwise before, like, it just seems like, and it kind of feels like I never knew why people could do things, and now I know, like, oh, I just didn't have the dopamine. Like, it's crazy, like how it's just so insane. But in terms of like not medicated stuff, like I'm still struggling to get help for some of my issues. So one of my things is that I eat for emotional regulation, in that, because when you do eat, you do get endorphins and stuff, and because I was
You get dopamine
unmedicated.
too.
Yeah. So whenever I feel stressed, I like snack. And so I've lost weight, like massive amounts of weight, twice in my life. And I don't want to do it again to just put it back on again. So I need support to like target why I'm eating, why I'm snacking. And so I keep trying to get help for that. And they'll do stuff like just keep a food diary. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help me, because I know, like, I'm not like being like, it's perfectly fine to eat this ice cream. It's not like I'm not knowledgeable. And then even now, knowing that I'm autistic with ADHD, I went through the GP to try and get support with like managing my stress eating, and they were just like, oh, we recommend that she reads a book about dieting and about food pyramid and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, like, and I've tried I've like called up, like, so we live we don't live in a massive city, but we live in a fairly large city, and there's just I've tried so many people to get help. I even like tried like someone in America, and that was well known for this, and who does clients in New Zealand. She's a New Zealander living in America, but she does like clients through to New Zealand through online means. And she's like, my books are full, sorry. But everywhere else is just like saying your needs are too complex. And I'm like, are they? Like, I'm telling you exactly why I'm doing it. I just need help to not do it.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it's far too complex. Sorry, far too complex. We can't possibly help you. And yeah, it's just, and like once
Well,
and
it
we were talking
sounds
before
like
about this.
it sounds like people are. It sounds like what you're saying is that people are needing to be better educated around autism and what some of the issues that autistic people face, and how that ties in to their profession, whatever whether they're a nutritionist or they're whatever there needs to be more education around that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and also just like to believe people, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if I'm telling, like, so one of my friends, something quite traumatic happened to him last year, and the way I coped with that was just spending money, because that was eating and spending money both give you endorphins and stuff. And so I just bought way too much stuff. So one of my friends was like, you know, I can help you sell a lot of that stuff that you bought and didn't use, just to recoup the money and to like get it out of your house and stuff. And I was like, that'd be great. And he kept trying to teach me how to sell stuff online, and I kept telling him, it's too stressful for me having to talk to the stranger, organize pickup, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And he kept like over and over again trying to like, but you know, if I can teach you to do it. And I'm like, okay, but believe me when I tell you that this is like, potentially I could do it after, let's say, 5 years of intense practicing, but life's too short to spend 5 years or whatever doing a thing that I can just pay someone else to do, you know? So if I could use the support money to help someone sell my stuff for me.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you, it reminds me of, this is something that I learned as a parent, because as a parent, what I used to do was that I used to try and coax my son into doing things that I wanted him to do. So that might be, I wanted to go to a restaurant with him and have a meal with him, for example. But but there was a point, I got to put it this way, I'd coax him into it and I wouldn't listen to him when he told me he was anxious and he wanted to go home. Which, and because I wanted to try and say, oh, we'll just do, and there was kind of like that not listening to that. And so what I got to with my son was, I got to a point where it was like, let's go to the movies, because he doesn't tend to like the movies because it's loud, and I'd say, let's go and see this favorite movie that you really like. But I'd say to him, at any point that you don't feel comfortable, we'll leave. So what it meant was, and I'd do that for anything that we tried together, that, you can wear whatever you want to wear. If you don't want to wear shoes, you don't have to wear shoes. If at any point you want to go, I'm not going to argue with you. You can just tell me and we'll go. So that once he heard that and he knew that and he started to believe me because I started to do that, he would feel a lot less anxious wherever we would go, and he would start to try new things. And that was because I was listening to him instead of trying to talk him out of this with my own, and that's kind of an example of what that person is kind of not listening to you, saying, I don't want to have that constant messaging and communication with strangers in order to sell my stuff. I don't want to do that. And instead of listening to that and hearing that you feel anxious about that and that causes you anxiety, they're pushing their kind of agenda forward. And I think that's a really, really vital and incredibly helpful, because from a neurotypical point of view, because we don't get it, we're like, oh, it's just this, or it's just selling online, or it's just this, what's the big deal? But from a autistic person's point of view, it is a big deal, and it causes huge anxiety, and that can be very traumatic. It can cause your brain to be in fight, flight, freeze a lot of the time. So I think what you've said, listening and listening, hearing, and doing, following the lead of an autistic person and what they're saying they need is really important.
I think that's also really important when you reflect on like sensory pain, because often people like just immersion therapy, like just keep doing it, it'll be fine. So, and it's not fine. So like sensory pain is real pain, and what happens is, like, if a kid's like, the sock is itchy, it feels bad, and the parents are like, no it's not. Or if they say it's too loud in here, no it's not. Oh, it's too bright in here, no it's not. You start to not, it's kind of like you start to be like, well, I guess it must not be too bright in here, so therefore when I am in, because as I said, like, sensory pain is real pain, so when I am in pain, I don't tell people, sort of thing mentality, because it's like you learned by denying kids and adults when they say this is hurting me, and so when they have other types of hurt, like a broken bone or something, when they're always told that their pain isn't real. And it has, so autistic people like have a massive problem at GPs, firstly telling people that they're in pain, because they're always told that their pain isn't real, because it's sensory pain and not understood. But then also then once they realize, okay, I am in pain, and tell the doctor, they don't exhibit the pain the way doctors might expect pain. So I think a lot of it does come down to believing people, which it's hard to do, because like especially like for example with eye contact, like weirdly enough, there's people who like spend ages trying to teach their kids eye contact, and I'm just like, why? Like, I can't make eye contact, and people say like, oh, but you need to, and it's like, well, okay, if I make eye contact, I'm not actually participating in the conversation, because I'm spending so much time trying to figure out, am I making the right amount of eye contact? So it's kind of like, just listen when someone says, I don't need to make eye contact to talk to you, and accept it. Don't be like, oh, yes you do, you just try hard enough. And it's like, well, maybe, but then, as I said before, like, my life's so short. Life is short, not my particular life, but life in general. How much time do I want to be spending on trying to make eye contact when there's so many other amazing things I can be doing?
Exactly.
And people just accept the fact when I tell them I don't make eye contact, they accept it.
The energy that goes into trying to be socially acceptable, rather than having a genuine connection, with another person. So, like teaching your children, always say hello and always say goodbye, and, hug auntie so-and-so. All of these things which require so much energy, and actually maybe denying, well, it is denying their anxiety that they experience. It's actually like completely having to shut myself down in order to do what these small and stupid things that nobody really needs. To make someone else feel comfortable, I have to make myself extremely anxious. And it's just really like it's really awful, really, really awful. And then we wonder why they have depression. Why, when they're constantly having to make other people feel comfortable and make and at the cost of their own their own mental health, basically.
Yeah. So there's a thing,
yeah.
like people, especially people who do mask a lot, it's so exhausting that a lot of people, when they get to like 30 or 40, go through burnout. They can't do anything.
Yeah.
Every day their brain is like double thinking, triple thinking. Am I doing the right facial expression? Am I doing the right thing? Their brain just like shuts down eventually. They're like, I can't do this anymore. And it's like, I don't understand why society's like, that's how people should live. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like, why can't you just accept the fact that this person doesn't smile when you say that thing? You know,
Yeah.
isn't that they're happy? Like,
Yeah.
why do you want this fake happiness over the genuine happiness I'd feel, even if their face isn't showing it?
100%.
For me, and I don't know, maybe this is also why I don't mask, is when I tell a lie, it hurts me physically. And even things that don't really count as lies. So, for example, people say that autistic people, you know, do scripting and stuff, but neutral people are always like, "Hi, how are you?" as a greeting. And if I say, "Good, thanks," and you, which is what the script says I'm supposed to say, that's not true. I don't know if I'm good or not. I haven't thought about it. So it hurts me to say that. And people say, other autistic people like, just say the script, man, that's what I need. But for me, because it hurts me to lie, and I know logically that's not a lie, it's just a social script that people use, it feels like a lie to me. So when someone says, "Hello, how are you?" as a greeting, it distresses me, because either I have to stop what I'm thinking and have to think about, well, how am I? You know, and analyze myself to find out how I am. Or I say the truth, like, "Oh, pretty shit." And they're like, or just fine. Sometimes I'd say fine, and they're like, "Oh, we're just fine," because I didn't say the right answer of "good, thanks, how are you?" And I'm just like, what's wrong with being fine? Like, it's just, and sometimes like even like going to the doctor's like, "Hi, how are you?" And I'm just like, why are you asking me that? I'm coming here to the doctor. Obviously, it's, you know, something, you know, like,
not good from here.
Yeah. And that's not to say that I don't want people to hear about how I am.
Yeah.
But don't use it as the greeting, because
if I'm going
to talk, if I want to talk to you about a trauma or something that's bothering me, I wouldn't do it in the opening sentence of seeing you. Like, talk, you know, like this. And so I don't answer when people say that. They say, "Hi, how are you?" And I'll just start talking.
Yeah.
And people think I'm rude.
I remember my son saying to me constantly, he used to constantly ask me, "Why did you laugh when you said that?" And I really found it hard to answer, because often we laugh as a social exchange, not because something's actually funny. And so it was really hard for me to try and explain that to him. And, you know, and I remember his dad saying, "Oh, it's just polite," or something, you know, and it was just like, it didn't actually make any sense. And it's taken me years to realize, and that actually I laugh at that moment because it's nervous laughter. It's some kind of social norm and nervous laughter that's happening at a time where it's not necessarily funny. It's just, it's really bizarre. So there's lots of things like that we do that are actually weird. They're actually weird. And what I really wish is that, because I actually love difference. I really love I love the autism in my son. I love the difference that he brings, that because it makes me think about, you know, the bluntness makes me laugh because it's blunt, but also because it's true. And his questioning, you know, his questioning social norms makes me think about, why do we do that? You know, that is dumb, you know, and I actually enjoy that, you know, and I just really wish, and I hope that we're becoming, it's not happening fast enough, but I wish that we would become a society that celebrated difference and was truly inclusive, not just pretending to be. Yeah, I think so many of the things that you've raised in this conversation, like I could just talk to you for so long because it's so interesting. But I guess, I think you've raised so many points for so many people to think about ways in which they could be more inclusive and ways in which they could celebrate difference, and be more supportive of difference, because I really believe that our world should adapt, not the other way around. That our society should adapt to individuals, not individuals having neurodiverse people having to find ways to fit in at the expense of their own mental well-being. That's terrible. I think that's terrible. And also, I guess just to finish off, I guess I'd really like to hear from you, because you've had such difficulty with the mental health system. And I will say that it's not always, because some people feel like, what's the point in going to the mental health system if they're just going to let me down?
Yeah.
But I think it is really, really important to still reach out, because if we don't do that, what's the alternative? Because I guess my question to you would be, what advice would you have to someone who was feeling really struggling with their mental health, struggling with suicidal thoughts, with dark thoughts, with depression? What suggestion would you have for some? And they may be autistic, or they may suspect they're autistic, or they may not be. What would you advise?
I don't really know how to advise a non-autistic person. Because I don't know what would help them. But for an autistic person, I would say extremely heavily find other local, either it's online or other local people who are autistic. In New Zealand, could be the whole of New Zealand, it's pretty small. And find out who are the people to go to, which are the doctors that you recommend. Listen, which are the doctors, which are the psychiatrists that are understanding, which are because there's so many. And when I say shit ones, I don't mean that they might be great for non-autistic people. I'm assuming lots of them are really lovely, kind people who are doing their best and have helped so many people. But because something about them means that they don't understand autistic people, and how that going to those sort of people is harmful. And when you're already struggling, and sometimes wait lists can be like months, and so you pin all your hope on this one meeting to suddenly stop the struggling, and it makes it worse if it's someone who doesn't know anything about autism, or especially how autism presents in women. It's just like you gotta find the people who have done the work before you to find out which are the good ones. That's
really good advice. Really good.
I guess it would also work for neurotypical people if they had a specific problem, and they could find the other people who are neurotypical had the other problem, and they could find out who works for them. So, but I don't know. But
I think in general, it's always helpful to ask around, because even for neurotypical people, they can have pretty bad experiences with counsellors, so they can experience the same sense of hopelessness. So I think it's always helpful to ask people if they would recommend someone, but just because one person found them to be good doesn't necessarily mean that you will as well. But I think it's a place to start, right? And so that's really, really good advice to connect in with the community and ask for recommendations. And I guess for someone who suspects that they might be autistic but is not diagnosed, is there and is not necessarily prioritizing diagnosis, or, is there anything that you would say to them?
Self-diagnosis of autism is completely valid, and because there are many autistic adults who aren't diagnosed because it's too expensive, it's too difficult to find someone. Like, if you think you're autistic, I personally haven't been in a group that doesn't accept self-diagnosis. So I'd say the majority of people in lots of autism-centric groups online and stuff are totally supporting of self-diagnosis, because sometimes it's just a fact that you don't have the money to get diagnosed, or you don't have the right person to see. And I don't mean like doctor shopping around. I mean like you don't see the person that understands. Yeah. So for me, it costs like, I think like $800, and that was just one appointment. And I happened to get the right guy because I'd asked around. You don't want to spend $800.
I mean, imagine spending $800 and you don't get someone who's actually good in this particular area, and they don't
and your
diagnose
needs,
you,
and you end up worse because you're like, well, no, I just wasted all my money, and So I would say you definitely ask around, try and find the right person, and but also don't give up.
Well, Elanor, I really want to thank you for your time. Really appreciate you've had so much wisdom to offer other people, and my heart breaks hearing your story. It's just so preventable. There's so many things that were preventable. And if there were, and my hope is that when people listen to the podcast, hopefully they are teachers, or the school principals, or the teacher aides, or the parents, or mental health clinicians, or whatever. They can hear that, or social workers, and they can actually contribute towards change. And even if none of those things, that they're just a member of the public, that hopefully they will realize that there is this need for us to be more inclusive and to accept people exactly how they are, without wanting or requiring them to change in order to have a social engagement with them, or to connect with them, and to really think about ways in which we can be more accepting, and ways in which we can be more celebrating of difference. But I just really thank you for your insight, because you're sharing with us what's going to be super helpful for you, and at this point we really need to listen to that. And so I appreciate you sharing that. It's really, really valuable, and thank you for your time.
No, thank you. But sorry, there's a PS at the end there. I want to point out about you talk about being more inclusive. It's not a charity reason. Like there are so many amazing autistic people that can really help society, but if they can't get through the interview process for a job because they're not making the right laughs, making the right social scripts properly, and even if like it's different if the job is like a service or a public facing where you need someone to be like happy and like fake happy and polite, whatever. It's like, think of all the people, think of all the amazing discoveries, think of all the amazing things that could happen if we included everyone. And it's even if you it's not a charity, or it's not a charity. I mean, it's obviously nice, it's good for society to include everyone, but there's also like benefits out 100%. Over than just being nice.
We're in many respects, when we exclude in any way anyone with any kind of disability, or someone who's neurodiverse, or different in any respect, and we exclude them, we miss out. We miss out as a society, because we're missing out on what they have to contribute to our society. And it just reminds me a little bit. Now, I don't know if this is true because I have not fact checked this, but a friend of mine said to me that NASA apparently goes out of their way to hire people with dyslexia, apparently. Now, again, I haven't fact checked this, so I probably will, after this, will probably fact check it. But he kind of, what he was saying was that NASA deliberately went out of their way to find people that looked outside the square and problem solve things in a different way, because they found that, obviously in NASA, they're doing new things. They're exploring, new things all the time. And so they need people who think in a different way, who think outside the norm. And I think, imagine if we were to include people who had so many different perspectives to offer. What could we achieve as a society? How could we benefit? It can only be good, right? So yeah, I really thank you. I really, really hear that, and I really appreciate your input, and thank you for your time.